that brings us to the end of our science fiction-esque tour with Havana Syndrome. I don't know if you're aware of that. Certainly those of you from the US know, because it's in the news all the time. But what we're seeing is a quite large number of cases, approximately 130 at this point, in US embassies around the world, where people are experiencing debilitating headaches and other symptoms affecting the brain, causing sick leave, retirements, and reduced work performance. Now, this has not been attributed to any state actor, but it's suspected that it is caused by adversary states using directed energy weapons with either microwaves or non-audible sound waves. Now, this is, if it is a capability, it's causing both physical effects that causes, or if it affects cognition, but it's also spreading fear and uncertainty in the US intelligence and diplomatic community, which is, of course, a cognitive effect in and of itself. And if it's caused by intentional acts, they are likely to be further developed and potentially used also on the battlefield. In order to defend, we must first understand the threat, and it's our belief that this threat is evolving. Some people ask if it's not just Stratcom or PSYOPs, but we believe that with the emerging technologies and new sciences, that it is more than just that. You may have heard the term cyber-enabled information operations or influence operations over the recent years. I believe it's been discussed in CyCon before. However, we think that the threat presented is bigger than that, especially when we look at the time perspective of 10 to 20 years, like the NWCC does. So we believe the medium to long-term future threat to the cognitive dimension is not just cyber-enabled, but more broadly technology-enabled. And we believe that the confluence of certain technologies and sciences might create a paradigm shift for malign influence, potentially multiplying the adverse effects we're already seeing in our societies. Now, looking at the next couple of slides, please keep that 10 to 20-year horizon in mind, because some of it might seem a little bit like science fiction. And it's important to note that these are just a couple of examples of potential developments that might affect this space. Also, I want to stress that while our own capabilities might use some of these tools, our adversaries, of course, continuously show that they go way beyond what NATO's ethical, legal, and moral boundaries are. And to mirror the transparency discussion from earlier in the conference, how NATO operates in the cognitive dimension is clearly described in publicly available doctrine. Those of you with military background, at least, will know that the OODA loop, or the Observe, Orient, Decide, Act loop, is the conceptual model for human decision-making by the US Air Force Colonel and fighter pilot John Boyd. At a high level, what we're exploring through this concept is how our adversaries can hack or disrupt our OODA loop, and how, conversely, we can hack or defend and enhance it. So, what kind of technologies are we talking about? Let's start with the most obvious. These are TTPs that we've already observed over several years. Now, our own Stratcom structure is already starting to leverage some emerging technologies like AI and data analytics in the Information Environment Assessment Capability, or IEA, that's currently being developed by NATO. IEA will provide detailed analysis of the information environment in order to support coherent and successful strategic communication, and contribute to the alliance deterrence and defense. Our adversaries are combining this with data mining of personal data, allowing them to perform highly targeted campaigns, or so-called micro-targeting. The data provided provides deep insight into the psychology of targeted groups and individuals, and is exploited to change attitudes and behaviors. The Cambridge Analytica data scandal from a few years back is, of course, a highly emblematic example of this. Sorry. There we go. A more recent addition to the flood of data comes from the emerging field of wearables. Now, probably you all, or most of you, have smartwatches, but there are other types of wearables as well. And increasingly, they are gathering physiological data about us. And this opens the door to targeting individuals at the exact time where they're most vulnerable to influence. For instance, when you're tired, hungry, angry, or happy, or whatever, you're much more vulnerable to influence. And if an adversary can tap into this kind of data, they're much more likely to be able to achieve their intended effects. Now, if this data is properly protected, and we all know from history that that's not always the case, it might not be easy to utilize this for mass influence, but it's certainly within the realm of the possible that our adversaries might use this for high-value targets. Now, going deeper into the rabbit hole, we are getting to neuroscience. And if you're following this space, you will know that at this moment, neuroscience is actually enabling us read and write access to the brain and to cognitive functions. Granted, it's still relatively rudimentary. Now, there are currently 3 major brain science initiatives run by China, the EU, and the US respectively. And these are driving research, providing an exponential growth in our knowledge about the brain and cognitive functions. So what this does for us is that because we are starting to be able to read thoughts to a degree and emotions, it gives us the ability to measure cognitive effects. It also gives us the ability, once we have gathered data and knowledge, to start to model cognition and start to model the cognitive dimension. Then we're getting closer to using modeling and simulation much in the same way we are using for other disciplines in the military, enabling experimentation, wargaming, and so on. And this will be of paramount importance to boost our understanding of the dimension. So there are also several research efforts that look into the possibility of cognitive enhancement. And as part of the concept effort, we're sponsoring a study by the NATO Industry Advisory Group, or NIAG, that will present possible military applications for cognitive enhancements. The NATO Science and Technology Organization, or STO, also has several efforts to identify needed research to advance our understanding of cognition and to advance the development of defense against cognitive warfare. In NATO, we are 30 democratic nations, hopefully soon 32, that has to agree on these standards. Not so for China or other autocracies, of course, where open sources tell us that they are conceptualizing the weaponization of neuroscience for military purposes to target the brains of their opponents.